Right. So hello everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today for our Safety Updates webinar series. My name is Elizabeth Diaz and I'm the Assistant Director of the Southern California NIOSH Education and Research Center. So the mission of our center is to contribute to the health, safety and wellness of workforce in Region 9, which encompasses California, Arizona, Nevada, Hawaii, and Guam, but also nationwide. So we put together this webinar series with our mission in mind, but really with the overall goal of bringing awareness to new and relevant workplace hazards, practices, and regulations. So today we wanted to talk to you all a little bit about the wildfire smoke standard, because the need to stay vigilant and about wildfire safety, as well as protecting workers from wildfire smoke, remains even as we move into these fall months. So according to CAL FIRE, wildfire risk is expected to be abnormally high for the remainder of this year because of climate predictions, but also the vegetation throughout the entire state is more susceptible to ignition and fire spread that has been seen in previous years. So we want to spend a little bit of time today discussing the standard. So I do want to let you all know that this webinar is being recorded and the recording will be available on our website later today. If you have any questions throughout our webinar, please feel free to use the chat and Q&A feature. Alba and I will be looking at that and answering your questions as we go through the webinar. An evaluation will be sent after the webinar to attendees. And for those that are seeking continuing education contact hours, we ask that you please submit your requests via the evaluation, because we do need those for our accreditation. And the certificates will be sent to you all within 1 to 2 business days via email. So with that, I will go ahead and hand it off to Alba, who's going to tell us a little bit more about Cal OSHA standard.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, Liz. Thank you so much for being with us one more time. Every first Friday of the month, we do these webinars. We pick a different topic. And this is why it's so important that your surveys are completed, because we also ask for suggestions for topics that you may be interested in. So this is right now the thing with wildfire smoke exposure. And the standard 5141.1 is not a very large one. So it is not meant for emergency responders, as you know. They have their own way of dealing with wildfire smoke. Why? Because they're right there fighting the fires. So for us, this has to do with the exposure once the fire is affecting the area surrounding the fire, and we get all the particulate matter that comes with wildfire smoke. So I am so pleased to be here. Thank you for that great introduction, Liz. I am so grateful to UCLA, UCI, Southern California, NIOSH Education and Research Center, because you guys put together these webinars and you also do a lot of outreach. She has mentioned in the past that we do take these classes to your workplace. So if you need any specific training with any topic that you can think of, from heat illness to ergonomics, hazardous materials, HASCOM, anything that you need in Spanish or English, because I'm bilingual, but any other languages, we will try to find you a trainer. But please let us know what you need. That's what we do. This is my authorization number on your screen. You can write it down and look me up in the OSHA.gov website. Just remember that I am not an attorney. I am a consultant who's been out there at your workplaces visiting you, walking the walk and talking the talk with employers and also employees. I got to tell you, employees are the greatest resource for you guys to understand what are the hazards at the workplace. And in the case of wildfire smoke, they are the ones that are interested in knowing, hey, is this, I can feel the smoke in my throat or in my nose. Is this going to hurt me? Is this something that I should bring up to my employer? Is this something that if I say something, they're going to retaliate against me? So the regulation is very clear about all of these little nuances and things that in reality and in practice in daily life, they come up. And that's what I want. That's our goal. So these are our learning objectives. But the goal of these entire every first Friday of the month series is to help you guys to break that gap between regulation and the way you do things at the workplace. Okay. So the first one, just identifying conditions under which Cal OSHA regulation applies. So many times employers are very interested, organizations are very interested as to, well, how a couple of employees complaining about feeling it in their throat, just coughing up when they are outside, picking up trash, or if they are in charge of maintenance for buildings or whatever they're doing outdoors, they're complaining. What should I do? Does this apply to me? We will approach that today. So we will talk about the air quality index, which is the term to know, and the thresholds for PM 2.5, the types of workplaces and workers covered by the standard. We want to also talk about the hierarchy of controls required by the regulation. Many of you are familiar with this term. Hierarchy of controls is what OSHA or safety in general requires you, safety person, to do. You're like, okay, so what does that mean? It's the way you think and the way you do safety at the workplace. So you start by trying to eliminate those hazards. If there is a cord on the floor that is making people trip, what do? Remove it. Remove the trip hazard, right? And with that, I'm eliminating the hazard. Engineering controls is creating barriers. So maybe you need those cords there. So you put a wall to divide those cords and electrical trip hazards from the walking of people that need to go around that area. Okay, you isolated the hazard. Boom, next layer in hierarchy of controls, you're engineering, right? It goes all the way down, administrative, and then PPE. So just wanted you to know, because that's part of our objectives. We're going to be talking about the hierarchy of controls. What does that tell us to do in regards to wildfire smoke? So we'll talk briefly about respiratory protective equipment, which is part of the PPE. And as you know, in the hierarchy of controls, the last layer of protection, you're thinking, ooh, I thought that was the way to protect workers against wildfire smoke. Just give them a mask. Is the last layer, because in the hierarchy of controls, we have that as the last layer for protection for workers. We want to explain how employers should implement these measures. It's easy peasy, and you should feel very confident after today's talk on what you can do, how to create a short policy, and how to make sure that this will reduce worker exposure to wildfire smoke. And then outlining communication and training. So this short standard 5141.1, if you've taken the time to actually click on it and look at it, it really isn't very lengthy, but as always, the wording in the regulation sometimes puts you to sleep. But I do, however, recommend, and Liz knows me, I always tell you guys, make sure you read the reg, make sure you read the definitions, especially if you're in charge of safety, if you're the director of safety, if you're in charge of walking the walk and doing safety inspections at your workplace, and that's your task, please print it out, read it, so that you have that background. And when you go out there and do your inspections, these terms and the requirements jump at you and okay, so this is what we can do in order to become compliant. Okay, so briefly, we're going to also talk about some of the health effects of wildfire smoke, the right to obtain medical treatment, and the proper use of those respirators on a voluntary basis. Okay, so many of you also log into these webinars because I always give you a brief introduction as to what's new, what's happening out there with Cal OSHA. After all, we call it the Cal OSHA Safety Updates free webinar. So just to start, the fall protection in residential construction. If you are in construction and you are working with residential construction where the trigger height to implement fall protection is 15 feet. You need to know that there are some changes coming up. Federal OSHA has forever kept a 6 feet rule, and they want us to change it because the 15 current trigger height is not as protective. So there's a lot of going back and forth. I have the link right there on your screen in order for you to be able to look it up and know a little bit more about this. There's a lot of pushback because, of course, there is a lot of money that has to go into training whenever there's fall protection in place, personal for protection. So right now what Cal OSHA is saying, maybe we will move towards having a plan where someone is monitoring those guys that are doing framing. So basically framers in residential construction. But still, you know, it does bring the question whether or not you as an employer have found it very burdensome financially to put together fall protection for those that are 15 feet, 6 feet up and more. Sorry. Okay, so that's what's happening there. Then also, because we have a heat wave, we continue to see a lot of the indoor heat and outdoor heat regulation reminders from Cal OSHA. If you have not subscribed to the Cal OSHA reminders and advisories, I highly recommend you do. You just have to go to the main web page and look on the sidebar to say email notices. And when you subscribe to these email notices, you receive notifications. For example, we got some for wildfire smoke just last week for the areas of San Bernardino, Corona. And so that highlights the issue of, oh, wow, I'm in one of those areas where the air quality is very poor. Nothing for Southern California, but more towards those areas affected by the line fire, because we did have a flare up just a couple of days ago. And although firefighters were very excited that they saw more containment, 80-something% and above was already contained, that this flare up, you know, set them back and also prolongs those conditions of wildfire smoke in LA, San Bernardino, Corona, etc. And I'm just mentioning those areas around where we in this webinar are working at. But for you guys to be able to keep an eye out on the air quality, you have to have tools. And so either you go to airnow.gov, which I'm going to show a little bit of an example of how they show the information on the app, and so that you read it and you know what to do. Just know that Cal OSHA is still going out there to workplaces with a high experience modification rate, meaning if you have had a lot of injuries in your workplace, and when they go out, they will check on issues that are prevalent at this time, which is indoor heat, outdoor, and also wildfire smoke, if they see that you have field workers out in the areas where the air quality is poor. And then, of course, we're going to talk about what does that mean. Okay, anything else that's new? Well, excessive heat advisories until Monday. I was just checking on some of these. This one, I believe, is for Los Angeles. And so when you take a look at the temperatures, you know that it is going to be 90 degrees and above, and anything that goes 95 and more, you're required to have high heat procedures in place. So there you go, San Fernando Valley, San Joaquin Valley, Coachella Valley. I mean, these temperatures are so high. San Luis Obispo, when have we seen 112? And add to this the issue of wildfire smoke. So we really got to take a step back and think, okay, how can we improve what we're doing, the safety of our workers, because these temperatures, some of you haven't seen temperatures this high, and combined with the outdoor wildfire smoke really prompts employers to plan and to reschedule work. And so I have a very good client of mine. What she is doing is she is scheduling work to really early morning. So usually they start at 7 a.m. So she talked to the employees. She told them the quality of the air is very poor. Mind you, they are in Corona. Plus the heat. I don't want you working in these conditions. And then they look at the information. You know, you have these tools such as the NIOSH heat index. And they look at their tools and they say, you know what? The temperatures are nicer at 5 in the morning, 4 in the morning. So let's move to start very early. They're actually starting at 4 in the morning and they're leaving by noon. So they're eliminating a lot of the exposure to the heat and the smoke just by changing their schedule and the time at which they start work. So there are a ton of OSHA updates and good stuff coming up. Aerosol transmissible diseases by 2025 might include the issue of COVID in a very specific way, because as you know, in 2025, we will stop having an emergency temporary standard for COVID. So it'll be kind of assimilated within the 5199 regulation for aerosol transmissible diseases. So take a look at the page where OSHA put some of these advisory meetings. And when you click on these words, because there's a ton of subject matter advisory meetings that are coming up, you can actually look at what's going on with that particular topic. The other thing that I put here is just kind of like a highlight about lead. So the regulation will be updated on January 1st, 2025. And I wanted to alert you guys to this because it's significant. The change is significant. So if in the past you actually went ahead and hired an industrial hygienist to come to your workplace and take measurements of lead exposure because either you have powder coating that involves paints with lead, or you have, for example, you have a shooting range where the people that practice there, a police department, right? You have this issue where there's lead exposure. Prior to 2025, you had a permissible exposure level of 50 micrograms per cubic meter in a time weighted average, meaning in an 8-hour shift. Now the PEL, the permissible exposure limit, it's going to be 10 micrograms per cubic meter, which is a significant change. And so I really advise you guys, if you're like, okay, what is she talking about? Permissible exposure limit. I never heard that term before, or any of these things, but you do know that there's some lead exposure in the activities at your workplace. I invite you to take a look at this or request a class regarding lead. Okay, and Liz will be happy to help you out with that. And so we move on to what's new as well with wildfire smoke, because it's the thing right now. It's on vogue. I hate when things are on vogue and they're a negative issue, right? Or something that causes health issues. And in this case, this temporary, it was an actual temporary standard. And you see OSHA many times takes those temporary standards and makes them permanent standards, which is exactly what happened with this regulation. So it became a permanent standard February 2021, right? And the standard or the rule, as it happens with most rules, is divided also just very similar to what you have on your screen. It usually goes into scope, then it'll say, okay, it applies to this, but these and these and these people are exempt, or these and these conditions are exempt. Then it always goes into definitions. And the reason why the definitions are so important is because these definitions many times are different from the definitions in your regular Webster's dictionary. So if you look, for example, heat wave definition, and you just Google it, it'll be very different from the actual definition found in the OSHA standard. So I love that example because it's very, very interesting how many times we just want to go with our concept of a definition of a term when we read a rule, and it's not so. You got to go back and see, let me see if there's an actual definition for this. Then there's communication of hazard exposures, then a requirement for training, and the controls are divided specifically the same way you would have that hierarchy of controls that we were talking about, right? First, eliminate the exposure, eliminate the hazard. Don't put your workers in a situation where they're going to be exposed to wildfire smoke. That's the first thing. And then if you looked into eliminating the hazard, move on to engineering controls. And every time you hear the word engineering, and those of you that have children, you know that if you put them in an engineering class, they're devising something, right? So my son right now is in an engineering class, and it's like 2 hours each Monday. And what they give him is like a ton of things, boxes. He loved it. There's just boxes of Lego parts and legs and cardboards and feathers and lots of just stuff. And they give him a theme, and they're supposed to engineer something with that theme, about that theme. So last time was sports. So he created a whole basketball court. Same thing here. When you say engineering controls, you're thinking of what can I put a physical barrier to the hazard, or a machine that will actually suck out all of that smoke from the environment, right? Or you know what? Engineering. Can we have AC and actually mechanical means of filtering the air to that space? That's an engineering control. Then you move into administrative. Okay, I did everything I could that was possible for us regarding engineering controls. And now we're going to move into administrative. So for administrative controls, the changing the way you do a task, rescheduling, rotation of personnel, right? So some employees only do it for 1 hour or 2 hours, and then another crew comes in and continues the work. So those are administrative controls, or starting super early and leaving work early as well, or not going to that job site where the air quality is so poor. Not going there, just don't go there, right? And then what do? You don't go there, you reschedule it. So very few of you on this call will have the issue where you have to go, right? So let's say plumbers. Plumbers need to be driving to areas where the air quality is poor. So now you get into, okay, so their vehicle is equipped with AC, mechanical means of filtering the air, and they're going to go into structures or buildings where there's also filtered air. Okay, no exposure. Although the outside air is bad, they are going from car to building, so there's no issue there. But what if that same plumber says, well, you know what, I'm going to a lot of these places in Corona or San Bernardino where the air quality is poor and I'm feeling it in my throat, I'm coughing up. Okay, so that's where we start talking about different groups of people with different sensitivities. And then we get into what the Environmental Protection Agency said about different groups and different sensitivities for respiratory issues. All right. So let me see if this thing, okay, so does this apply to me? The section, that funny symbol before the number 5141.1 means section. So it's Title 8 of the California Code of Regulations, Section 5141.1, protection from wildfire smoke. And then it goes into worker safety and health in wildfire regions. And the scope is this section applies to, right? So 2 conditions must be met. Employers, safety directors on this call, people that have done this every Friday of the month, first Friday of the month webinar. When do you have to actually look into complying with all of the requirements for 5141.1? When 2 conditions are met. The air quality index for PM 2.5 is 151 or greater. And when you, the employer, reasonably anticipate that the workers will be exposed to wildfire smoke, meaning that you cannot take them away from that area. They're going to be exposed to wildfire smoke. And the air quality index, you checked or you received notices because you have subscribed to their notices and they send you texts or emails for numbers on air quality index. By the way, you're required as a safety director, you're required to look into this and get this information. Now you're thinking, and what is PM 2.5? Okay, particular matter 2.5 is any tiny solid particle, because a particle is something that is not a gas or a vapor, okay? So these particles that are smaller than 2.5 or 2.5 and below are small enough to settle in the very smaller portions all the way down into the alveoli of the lungs. So you can already start thinking, those of you that have taken the aerosol transmissible disease class, kind of, or if you're an industrial hygienist or somebody that has been in the research in regards to particulate matter and hazardous substances for the human body, you do know that depending on the size of a particle, depending how big they are, you will breathe the air around you and they will settle in different portions of your respiratory tract, right? So some of the bigger particles, they just get to your nose and the boogers in your nose will trap them and then you go blow your nose and that's the end of that. The smaller particles will go down more into the respiratory system, all the way into the lungs, all the way into the alveoli, and they may even reach, so 2.5 microns in diameter or less, will actually reach those areas where there is that exchange of oxygen in the bloodstream. So all the way to the human being's bloodstream. And so you can't work it out by coughing it up or like you would do with a larger size particle. And that's the danger of PM 2.5. Mind you, the Environmental Protection Agency has created these notices for air quality index, not just for PM 2.5, but also for ozone and carbon monoxide, which are contaminants in the air. And sometimes there's something more like sulfur dioxide, depending on what's in that area. So there's information there that also is there for you to see, you know, because ozone is also can become dangerous for humans. Nevertheless, the regulation only focuses on PM 2.5 because that's what smoke or wildfire smoke regions will make the air surrounding the fire dangerous for workers in that area. All right. So exceptions. This regulation says if you have workers who are in a nice air-conditioned building where there's mechanical means for the air to be filtered, then it doesn't apply to you. You don't even have to look into 5141, no worries. The other exception has to do with exposure that is less than 1 hour per shift. And so this is where that particular example that I was talking about applies. Let's say plumbers that go into from their vehicle into buildings that are air conditioned, but sometimes because they have to park and walk towards this building, etc., they have that exposure to the outdoor to the air, which has wildfire smoke particles in it, or PM 2.5, then that's exposure. But if you can work it out that their exposure in their entire 8-hour shift is less than an hour, then the regulation doesn't apply to you. Does that make sense? And then, of course, we said any emergency responders, firefighters, they are different. You do not take them into account for this regulation. They don't look at this regulation because they have different procedures and they have a different set of rules because they're there fighting the fire. That's their work. That's their job, right? You can't say, oh, let's engineer this. Let's not go fight the fire. That's what they do. So, all right. So what I wanted to tell you guys is, although you have exceptions to the rule, I always tell all of you, my safety directors, my clients, all of you wonderful people who teach me about what you do out there, you still want to give people information and empower them. And so for most of my clients this month and this week, I've been doing talks or including them, including in their talks, a little bit of wildfire smoke, because you want to prompt that conversation where some of these individuals that may be more sensitive to wildfire smoke raise their arm and say, you know what, I've been feeling it in my throat. I know that for me is very little exposure. Nevertheless, my whole life I've suffered with asthma, for example. And they'll come up and tell you this. You encourage this conversation to be private because all of these health matters should be private, and human resources are very good at doing this. So this conversation happens, and then you implement certain controls for those people that are in sensitive groups. Okay, so now you need to know what that means, right? So the air quality index provided by the Environmental Protection Agency has given us the following 6 categories to give us information about the air and how good or bad or how healthy or hazardous it is, right? So if you see these green dots when you're opening up your app or the information by the airnow.gov, you see, oh, 0 to 50 PM 2.5 is considered good. The air is good to breathe, not dangerous at all. 51 to 100 is moderate. And then I have some people saying, especially my managers, supervisors, like, wait a minute, you know, my workers see this yellow moderate, like, I'm telling you, I'm feeling it is bad. You know, I don't know why you say you have to wait till it's red. Okay. Yellow and orange is exactly what I was just discussing. This is for people that may have sensitivities, and they're already feeling it. Either it's exacerbating their asthma, or they're getting a cough that they can't put a finger on, or they just get this irritation and phlegm. All right. So from 51 all the way to 150, you may get here and there a worker that is sensitive to air pollution. And so they will come up to you and tell you. And so what do? You have to accommodate by either rescheduling their work, because as you can tell by today's talk, you're not here triggered by the regulation to put all of these protections in place, such as engineering controls, administrative controls. But because you have a worker saying, hey, you know what, I'm feeling it, and I know we're in the hundreds and it's not above 120 or whatever, you do want to accommodate by rescheduling their work, by maybe starting them earlier than other groups. Let's say you have a pest control company, have them go earlier, because you will see that your apps will give information as to the time of the day where the air will be better the next day. And so that's how you're going to plan their work. And then you have 155 to 200 is unhealthy. So mind you, for the red circle, it's unhealthy for everyone. So it's not just for those that have sensitivities, not for those that have heart and lung problems. So a lot of these people with heart and lung problems may raise their hand and say, hey, you know what, I've been feeling it. And it's because they have pre-existing conditions. So the red, unhealthy for everyone. And you can make your notes there. Oh, okay, unhealthy for everyone. And when you do a quick or brief tailgate meeting, you can go into this and say, remember, from moderate to, from 51 to 150, in that range is only those individuals that have some sensitivity to air quality issues or respiratory pre-existing conditions that are going to have some symptoms. And we want to know, we encourage you to come up to us and talk to us privately. We want to accommodate you so that you continue to be healthy. Are you required to do this? No. Do I encourage it? Yes. You always want to go above and beyond what the regulation requires, because as you will know from your insurance carrier, that's what we call a culture of safety. So a culture of safety is not like a unicorn, something that doesn't exist. And now my English sometimes acts up. I said unicorn. There we go. It's better. So safety culture means that you have these ongoing talks, even when it doesn't apply to you. You want people to stay healthy. And of course, it's always like a double-edged sword, right? Because then you have those issues where now it's like, well, you said that if I am sensitive, now you have to do something for it. Okay. So if you have poor safety culture, yeah, you will have issues where people complain and it becomes nightmarish. But if you're building a culture of safety throughout many years, where they understand where you're coming from, where you want to provide them a safe and healthy work environment, this should be good. This should always work in your favor. So anything in the red is already unhealthy for everyone. And the EPA considers anything above 300 hazardous. Is hazardous, all right? So basically, and before I change my slide, I just want to tell you that from 151 to 500 PM 2.5, OSHA allows you to provide, if you're going to expose them, and you already went through the hierarchy of controls, engineering controls, administrative controls, and now you know that you have to go to those areas where your field workers are going to be performing a task exposed to this unhealthy air of 151 to 499, then you must talk and train in the use of respirators, and these have to be particulate respirators. So these are your masks, just the regular N95 that they will use to filter the air that they're breathing. Mind you, you are allowed to do it within the regulation clause for voluntary use, which says that you're not making the wearing of this N95 mandatory, but voluntary. But by doing this, you still have to talk to them about, hey, I'm not your doctor. I don't know if it is okay for you to wear this mask, So since we're doing it on a voluntary basis because we do not have a respiratory protection program, I would like you to ask your doctor. That's number one. So this discussion. Number two, you have to give them, Appendix D of the regulation. What regulation? Write it down, 5144, which is for respiratory protection. There's an appendix D basically tells people this is a particulate respirator. It doesn't protect you against vapors, gases. It's not a, so that they don't put it on and think that they're protected against anything that is in the air, right? The limitations of that particular respirator, and that you train them on how to put it on and how to take it off. Okay, and I know there's some questions. Do I have some questions, Liz?
No, there's no questions, but I did see that one of our participants raised their hand. I'll give them the ability to talk if they want to make a comment or ask a question.
Absolutely.
Levin,
It always
feel
makes
free
for a
to-
nice break in the talk. So it's like, talk to us, please.
Yes. Levin, I just give you the ability to speak if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question.
Okay, I'll keep going, but you can also type it either in the chat and then I'll go ahead and tackle it. But being exposed to smoke does not need to be part of the job. And remember that these tiny particles irritate the lungs. And so let's talk a little bit about how it can hurt the lungs and heart. And like what I said is, it will travel all the way down into your respiratory system in the lungs, and it will settle all the way into the alveoli, which is, if you can imagine, the last part of the farthest part of the branch inside your lungs is where the alveoli are at. And those are the ones, or that's the exact place where the exchange of oxygen into the bloodstream occurs. And so these particles are going to end up into the bloodstream of our individuals because they're breathing these PM 2.5s, right? So this will end up in or causing reduced lung function, bronchitis, worsening of asthma, and heart failure. Breathing in smoke can affect you right away. Why? Because you can feel it and you can start coughing, having trouble breathing, wheezing, or experiencing asthma attacks if you are susceptible to it, stinging in the eyes, scratchy throat, runny nose, irritated sinuses, headaches, tiredness, chest pain, a fast heartbeat. So it is good to kind of show the symptoms. And this is what I do. If you are not required to look into this standard, because you all saw today, okay, so we check the air quality, and I want you to think of these as step-by-step. Step number one, check the air quality. If it's in those numbers where you have to start 151 and above, then you look into eliminating the hazard, right? Not letting anyone work there. But if workers are bringing up these symptoms, then try and put something in place to protect them, especially because you want to make sure that they help you identifying the harmful exposure. So what should you do if you're exposed? So if you're working in areas where the EPA through Air Now applications or information that you're receiving by text or email, if you can reasonably anticipate that there will be exposure, now you need to see when is it going to be harmful. And that's why we took our time in explaining the color system and the 6 categories of PM 2.5 and how it affects individuals, right? So identify when is it harmful. And remember, 151 and above, it's unhealthy air for everyone, no matter if you're sensitive or not. 151 and above, unhealthy for everyone. So right there and then you can identify when is it that you're going to be having field workers at areas with that kind of number. Communicate with workers. So this is the part of the regulation that requires that you talk to them. So once you've determined that you are exposing the workers because they have to be working in that area at 151 PM 2.5 and above, then you have to tell them, okay, let's talk about the areas of work that you have to be present and performing work. the AQI, or the air quality index for PM 2.5 is, and you discuss the numbers, right? And then you tell them, okay, now let's talk about those protective measures. How are we going to reduce exposure to this PM 2.5 when it is 151 or above? And so it could be by having them go into their vehicles or into buildings where there's mechanical means of filtering the air, so that they do not have exposure to more than 1 hour, right? To that outdoor air where the air quality is 151 and above. Provide training on wildfire smoke hazards. And when you provide training, you have to talk about the controls. Engineering control, this is when we get into your vehicle or a building. Administrative control, we're relocating work. We're not going to go to this area. We're going to take, let's go retrieve the parts and take them to our own headquarters, and we will work there. We will not work at the client's location because they have roll up windows where the whole inside production floor has air from the outside flowing through, and the air is not good for right now. So you relocate the work, or you change the schedules. And then last but not least, we said personal protective equipment. And in this case, it would be respirators. Mind you, I wanted to make a note here, anything above 500, the number 500, so an AQI for PM 2.5 of 500 and above requires that employers provide respirators, and that a respiratory protection program by the company is in place. And a respiratory protection program requires that you follow 5144, Section 5144 of California OSHA. And that has to do with, these workers are going to have to be wearing a respirator. We're going to send them for a medical evaluation before they start wearing it. And so that's what I was talking to you about. Before that number, before the 500, you can provide this mask on a voluntary basis. And you're telling them, if you have anything that is respiratory, that makes you sensitive to smoke, wildfire smoke, or any preconditions such as asthma, lung, or heart disease, you have to talk to your doctor, because maybe you cannot wear one of these respirators, right? And so in the case of when you have to make mandatory the wearing of respirators, because the air quality in most of the areas that you are sending workers to is 500 and above, you must put in place a respiratory protection program. We can also help you with that. So let us know, let Liz know or me, and we will make sure we help you out with that. I know I had a couple questions. Is this an hour over an 8-hour working shift? For example, a concrete truck driver drives to several different work sites throughout the day. Yeah, and while he's in the cabin of his truck, he is not being exposed, but every time that he goes out, and if he's, especially because with the concrete, if he is the one pumping, he's going to be outside breathing. So yes, that would be 1 hour over an 8-hour working shift. So here, what you would do for that worker is, if you're sending him to areas of work where the air quality is 151 or above, and he is going to be out pouring concrete and attending to the pump for more than an hour, then you're going to train him in the use of one of those N95s. But you also, before you do the N95, you have to really look into, does he really need to go to those work sites? Can we reschedule? Can we start earlier? Can we talk to, because I know with construction, there's so much around the situation of planned work. You have this general contractor who has different trades at different scheduled times. So it's really hard to move schedules. But because the air quality is such a huge issue right now, especially for construction workers in those areas, these are changes that are occurring within those sites. And so bringing this up should not be a problem. And so maybe you have these activities rescheduled, because I'm pretty sure for a concrete guy, especially if he's attending to the pumping operations, he will have to not work in an area where the air quality is 151 or above. unless, you know, you're working at a hospital with a deadline for completing the project and the contractor is actually doing the whole training and kind of saying, you know what, we're going to do it. We're just going to provide within 95 for everyone because we got to get this moving. The circumstances could be different for everyone. That was an excellent question. Excellent question. You're so welcome. Excellent questions. We love questions because it makes the whole topic come alive. All right, very good. Summarizing what we've said up until now, and this is important. The first thing you need to do, all of you right now, because there's smoke in the air, is check the air quality of your location of work, especially if you have field workers. Now, ask the question, do I anticipate exposure? What does that mean? Precisely what we were discussing. Do I have guys who drive the concrete trucks and they're doing pouring of the concrete? They have to attend to the pump, so they got to step out of the vehicle and be right there visually checking and supervising the operation and the pumping of the cement or the concrete or whatever they're doing. So now they're, how long? Oh yeah, so I anticipate exposure. So check the air quality of the area. Do you anticipate exposure? Yes or no? If you say yes, can you relocate or reschedule the work? So hopefully the answer to that will be yes, reschedule the work. Do not expose them, right? Either start really early because your apps will give you information as to what time of the day the air quality is in the orange or the yellow. Because maybe by 12, which is usually the sunniest, when you have the sun right above the workers, is when the air quality is the worst. So if you could finish the work in the hours where those dots are green, yellow, and orange, and also given that conversation where the worker who's going to be exposed at that level says, yeah, I'm a healthy individual, no preconditions that may affect the work. Okay, relocate or reschedule. And number 4, respirators. So you've done all of this, you've done your homework, but you still know that they have to go to those work areas. There's no way you can reschedule it. There's no way you can actually do the work somewhere else. They have to be there. Okay, so we look into respirators on a voluntary or mandatory basis. So that will depend on how bad the AQI is. Anything from 151 to 499, voluntary basis. You still have to have this talk with them and this training on how to put it on, how to take it off. And we've played videos of this before on how to use an N95 on a mandatory basis. But it's very easy. You can just Google OSHA wearing of a N95 on a voluntary basis, and you'll watch a 10-minute video on it. And then mandatory, if it's mandatory, then you have to look into section 5144, and you have to make sure that you assign the workers. So you have a select group of people who are going to be using these respirators. So don't just do this for everyone, okay? Don't do this for everyone in your organization. It has to be that select group of people who are going to be exposed to those areas where there's wildfire smoke of more than 500 PM 2.5, right? So when the air quality is that bad, it's mandatory. So basically what I just said, AQI 151 to 500, mandatory, and voluntary use is encouraged below 500, so from 151 to 500. And remember that you must reduce exposure to an equivalent of AQI less than 151. So that's your goal. Whenever you provide respirators, whenever you're rescheduling work, whenever you are doing all of these things to go around exposing workers to wildfire smoke, your goal is that they don't have to be present and outdoors breathing air with an AQI above 151, at 151 or above, okay? So you also have to talk to them about whenever it's voluntary, you still have to tell them how to use them, how to clean it, how to storage. So first of all, you wouldn't clean an N95. The mask on the screen is a disposable mask, but there's also a way you put it on and you take it off, because when they take it off, they shouldn't grab it by the filtering material. They should grab it by the straps. One strap comes off, the other strap comes off, and into the trash it goes, because touching the actual respirator puts the particulate matter, the contaminants on their hand, right? So give them also an APA handout about the, and maybe I can find it in a moment and I'll show it to you guys. Talk to them whenever it's even on a voluntary basis. I talk about facial hair. And it's not only facial hair that will break the seal of a mask, of an N95. So on your screen, you have here a darker line around the face of the worker, which is where the N95 will sit. And you want that piece of filtering material to seal against the skin of the worker. So the best option, the best way to go about it is when people are clean shaven. There's no problem, it's going to be a nice seal. But even stubble, so the 5 o'clock shadow, right, will create those prickly tiny hairs to push the mask away from their face, and it totally breaks the seal. And so when you breathe air, all that air is not being pushed through the filtering mask, but it's being pulled through the leakage, all of the openings around the seal. And so now they're breathing all of those particles. And so the wearing of the mask is useless if they don't have a good seal. Sometimes when they have a goatee, might be where they can achieve seal, but it has to be like a small portion of hair because you can easily cross the area where the limit of the mask is at. A circle beard, no, because there's a lot of large hairs that will push the mask away from their face, although they may be thinking, but I do have clean shaven skin all around where the mask will sit. But when the hair is long, it pushes the mask. And so the last one, whenever there's just facial hair that is very short and it will not be long and interfere with the seal, it's also a-okay. Remember to talk to them about hats, scarves, and long hair. All of it breaks the seal. And I'll give you an example. If you have someone like me right now with long hair and you try to put on a mask, all this hair is going to interrupt that the straps laying flat and helping pull that mask to my face. So hair needs to be up in a ponytail or in a bun so that the straps are at the crown of the head and at the back of the neck, on the skin of the neck, laying flat. Okay, so hats, of course, and scarves. Now, mind you, this is very important for this particular regulation. Workers have the right to bring up any concerns and the right to know the AQI without fear of retaliation. So you don't want to complain from a worker to Cal OSHA, and then you get a call or you get a letter from OSHA saying that you are retaliating against workers just for bringing up the issue of not knowing what the AQI is, right? So what I would do is ask them to get every single worker, especially if you have smart devices distributed that are for work use, let them have the information very handy so that they get a text about the AQI every day right now that the air quality is poor in many of these areas. So talk to them about AQI, PM 2.5 exposure, use of respirators like we discussed, and tell them that you want them to tell you about any worsening air conditions. Tell them they have the right to a safe and healthy environment and their safety comes first. Without them, you can't do the work that needs to be done, right? Check at the start of the shift. Don't forget, the regulation says it very clearly. You must identify hazards, and you don't want to do it in the middle of the day when it's already sunny and the air quality is bad. Plan the work. Check at the start of the shift again, because many times, and make a note right here, guys, the wind will change the conditions for that area. So many times you're thinking, oh, it's going to be very bad, very smoky, and then all of a sudden it's not. For example, we were expecting a lot of smoke in our area here in Orange County with the Trabuco, all the Trabuco Canyon areas because of the smoke, but the wind favored us, and we did not have a lot of the ash and the smoke that fall in the next days after containment. So wind is a huge factor. So check again at the start of your shift, communicate those hazards, allow workers to inform you, to tell you without fear of, tell them you will not be, talked down. So even verbally talking down to your workers just because they brought up an issue of concern is considered you taking retaliative action. So, you want them to bring up concerns. You want them to bring up any identified hazards. Effective procedures for informing employees of the current AQI for PM 2.5 is identified. So basically, this on your screen is what is required in regards to communication and training. So the air quality, how you're going to protect them, that you want them to tell you if anything is worsening or the air quality is worse, and symptoms, okay? So you also want to encourage them to come and privately tell you if they have pre-existing conditions where this may be an issue. Remove them from those job sites. Okay, so engineering controls, we talked extensively about this. Engineering controls is part of that hierarchy of controls, administrative and PPE. And it's what you see on your screen is exactly how the regulation reads. For example, it says for engineering controls, you shall reduce. So it's not like maybe you want to reduce, you have to. You shall reduce employee exposure to PM 2.5 or to less than current AQI of 151. So that's what we were discussing. I told you guys about this, and this is the requirements, right? So providing enclosed buildings, structures, vehicles where the air is filtered, but to reduce the exposure to less than 151, right? And then you go into, okay, I did everything I could. We implemented the use of filters, but they still have to go outdoors for this many minutes in an 8-hour shift. So that adds up to more than an hour. What else do we do? Hey, maybe we have these guys taking turns or different crews. So now this guy is not exposed to more than 1 hour, and so forth and so on. Be smoke ready. So even if you're not required to comply with any of the things that we talked about, I want you all to have this discussion. Talk to your employees, let them know, especially if you're in one of those areas where you're being affected by smoke, but you are inside a building all day long and you're not exposing workers. You still want to talk to them about this just briefly for 5 minutes, tell them where to go. So if we do have here an actual link, and I can show you, it says be smoke ready. I am sharing this with those clients or facilities where they do not have to comply with the regulation. I put it in the chat for all of you to see. And it basically says, be smoke ready, plan ahead, know your risk. And this is wonderful because it talks about, if you precisely sensitive individuals, what it is to be a sensitive individual, and not to freak out when the air quality is in the yellow or the orange, because the word is moderate. And many people, and I've had this question, hey, it already says moderate, so that's unhealthy. And you're talking about healthy individuals telling you, so it's in the orange, it's unhealthy. Well, they need to understand where this is coming from, right? Environmental Protection Agency says 151 and above for PM 2.5, it's unhealthy for everyone, no matter how healthy you are. But anything below that, anything 151 and below, if you are an individual with some sensitivities or pre-existing condition or heart and lung problems, yeah, that should raise the flag for you to manage your risk. Make a clean room. So there's a lot of cool stuff here. Air Now has all of these use portable air cleaner, stock up on HVAC filters, even tells you how to do a do-it-yourself air cleaner, right? So stock up on HVAC, etc. And Air Now, this is just kind of giving you an overview because we have a minute here. You put the zip code and it allows you to get the information for that city. Corona, California in this case. And then we go into today, it's in the red. What did we say red means? That means it's above 151, right? And so Those of you in Corona, California, if you have operations where workers are exposed to the outside air, you need to implement engineering, administrative, and PPE. And in that order, you have to look first in the engineer at elimination, then engineering, then administrative. Okay, so this is now very clear to you why in the orange you're still not required to do anything but accommodate those individuals that come up to you in a private conversation and tell you, lately I've been having heart problems, I'm on medication, etc. And I can't go to that area because the air is very unsafe, that kind of stuff. Then it also gives you information on the fires. Whenever you look at a map, now you will have those little circles with colors and a lot of great data in the actual app. There is also a way to sign up, which EnviroFlash, I know it's EnviroFlash, EnviroFlash.info or notifications. Okay, so last but not least, and I'll let you go, enjoy your weekend. Make sure you go to EnviroFlash info, you put your email address, and you get information so that you can stay up to date on anything wildfire smoke related. Thank you, guys. I can see many of you saying thank you on in the chat. It's 12 o'clock and maybe your stomachs are rumbling. You want to go and eat something. Liz, I appreciate your time. I wish you all a fantastic weekend. And I hope you all sign up for notices at the EnviroFlash link that I am putting up here. Hold on a second. So I put here. So EnviroFlash. Thank you. I can see great messaging there. Okay. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, everyone. I also put a link in the chat from NIOSH. They recently, during Respiratory Protection Week last month, they expanded their repertoire of respirator infographics, and they're available in multiple languages. So if you want to have a look at anything that is related to respiratory protection, especially N95s, those resources are available to you all.
That is wonderful. That is great. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy. Send us your questions. Thank you, Becca, for coming to this section. Alex, Roxanne, Kate, Levon, Jonathan, Tyler, everyone. You guys are awesome. I'll see you next month. First Friday of the month. Spread the word.